Uh, we're going to tackle chapter 14 today. Chapter 14 is it's the health psychology chapter. It's about stress and health. Hair's a little bit messed up. I've been outside all morning, so it's a bit frizzy. So let's go ahead and get started since we're right here anyway. All right. There we go. Okay. Chapter 14, stress, lifestyle, and health. Okay, we're going to start off by talking about stress. The term stress as it relates to the human condition first emerged in the scientific literature in the 1930s, but it did not enter the popular vernacular until the 1970s. Today, we often use the term loosely in describing a variety of unpleasant feeling states. For example, we often say we are stressed out when we feel frustrated, angry, conflicted, overwhelmed, or fatigued. Despite the widespread use of the term, stress is a fairly vague concept that is difficult to define with precision. Researchers have had a difficult time agreeing on an acceptable definition of stress. Some have conceptualized stress as a demanding or threatening event or situation, for example, high stress jobs, overcrowding, and long commutes to work. Such conceptualizations are known as stimulus-based definitions because they characterize the stress as a stimulus that causes certain reactions. Stimulus-based definitions of stress are problematic, however, because they fail to recognize that people differ in how they view and react to challenging life events and situations. Others have conceptualized stress in ways that emphasize the physiological responses that occur when faced with demanding or threatening situations, for example, increased arousal. These conceptualizations are referred to as response-based definitions because they describe stress as a response to environmental conditions. Endocrinologist Hans Selye once defined stress as the response of the body to any demand, whether it is caused by or results in pleasant or unpleasant conditions. A useful way to conceptualize stress is to view it as a process whereby an individual perceives and responds to events that they appraise as overwhelming or threatening to their well-being. A critical element of this definition is that it emphasizes the importance of how we appraise, that is, judge, demanding or threatening events, often referred to as stressors. These appraisals in turn influence our reactions to such events. And of course, this is a picture of Sisyphus. Sisyphus is the individual. What did he do? He didn't give humans fire. He gave them something else. Anyway, one of the gods didn't like him, so his punishment was to have to roll a boulder up a mountain. And by the time he got it to the top, it rolled all the way back down, and then he had to start all over again. And that was the myth. That's the myth of Sisyphus. And that's what this picture is of, except in this case, it's stressors. A primary appraisal involves judgment about the degree of potential harm or threat to well-being that a stressor might entail. A stressor would likely be appraised as a threat if one anticipates that it could lead to some kind of harm, loss, or other negative consequence. Conversely, a stressor would likely be appraised as a challenge if one believes that it carries the potential for gain or personal growth. The perception of a threat triggers a secondary appraisal, judgment of the options available to cope with the stressor, as well as perceptions of how effective such options will be. A threat tends to be viewed as less catastrophic if one believes something can be done about it. To be sure, some stressors are inherently more stressful than others, in that they are more threatening and leave less potential for variation in cognitive appraisals, for example, objective threats to one's health or safety. Nevertheless, appraisal will still play a role in augmenting or diminishing our reactions to such events. If a person appraises an event as harmful and believes that the demands imposed by the event exceed the available resources to manage or adapt to it, the person will subjectively experience a state of stress. If one does not appraise the same event as harmful or threatening, they are unlikely to experience stress. According to this definition, environmental events trigger stress reactions by the way that they are interpreted and the meanings they are assigned. Stress is largely in the eye of the beholder. It's not so much what happens to you as it is how you respond. Stress can sometimes be a positive motivating force that can improve the quality of our life. This kind of stress, which Selye called eustress, from the Greek eu, meaning good, is a good kind of stress associated with positive feelings, optimal health, and performance. A moderate amount of stress can be beneficial in challenging situations. Research shows that moderate stress can enhance both immediate and delayed recall of educational material. Increasing one's level of stress can cause performance to change in a predictable way. As stress increases, so do performance and general well-being, eustress. When stress levels reach an optimal level, the highest point of the curve, performance reaches its peak. A person at this stress level is colloquially at the top of his game, meaning he feels fully energized, focused, and can work with minimal effort and maximum efficiency. When stress exceeds this optimal level, it is no longer a positive force. It becomes excessive and debilitating, or what Selye termed distress, from the Latin dis, meaning bad, bad stress. People who reach this level of stress feel burned out, they are fatigued, exhausted, and their performance begins to decline. If the stress remains excessive, health may begin to erode as well. Stress is everywhere, and it has been on the rise over the last several years. Each of us is acquainted with stress. Some are more familiar than others. In many ways, stress feels like a load you just can't carry. Stress is an experience that evokes a variety of responses, including those that are physiological, for example, accelerated heart rate, headaches, or gastrointestinal problems; cognitive, for example, difficulty concentrating or making decisions; and behavioral, drinking alcohol, smoking, or taking action directed at eliminating the cause of the stress. Although stress can be positive at times, it can have deleterious effects in health implications, contributing to the onset and progression of a variety of physical illnesses and diseases. The scientific study of how stress and other psychological factors impact health falls within the realm of health psychology, a subfield of psychology devoted to understanding the importance of psychological influences on health, illness, and how people respond when they become ill. Health psychology emerged as a discipline in the 1970s, a time during which there was increasing awareness of the role behavioral and lifestyle factors play in the development of illnesses and diseases. Health psychologists investigate issues such as why people make certain lifestyle choices, for example, smoking or eating unhealthy food, despite knowing the potential adverse health implications of such behaviors. Health psychologists also design and investigate the effectiveness of interventions aimed at changing unhealthy behaviors. One of the most fundamental tasks of health psychologists is to identify which groups of people are especially at risk for negative health outcomes based on psychological or behavioral factors. Physiologist Walter Cannon in 1932 proposed the fight or flight response, which occurs when a person experiences very strong emotions, especially those associated with a perceived threat. During the fight or flight response, the body is rapidly aroused by activation of both the sympathetic nervous system and the endocrine system. This arousal helps prepare the person to either fight or flee from a perceived threat. And in this case, this lady obviously fought. According to Cannon, the fight or flight response is a built-in mechanism that assists in maintaining homeostasis. an internal environment in which physiological variables such as blood pressure, respiration, digestion, and temperature are stabilized at levels optimal for survival. Thus, Cannon viewed the fight or flight response as adaptive because it enables people to adjust internally and externally to threats in their environment, allowing them to continue to be alive and overcome the threat. Selye discovered the general adaptation syndrome, the body's nonspecific physiological response to stress. The general adaptation syndrome consists of three stages: the alarm reaction, the stage of resistance, and the stage of exhaustion. Alarm reaction describes the body's immediate reaction upon facing a threatening situation or emergency, and it is roughly analogous to the fight or flight response described by Cannon. During an alarm reaction, you are alerted to the stressor and your body alarms you with a cascade of physiological reactions that provide you with the energy to manage the situation. If exposure to a stressor is prolonged, the organism will enter the stage of resistance. During this stage, the initial shock of alarm reaction has worn off and the body has adapted to the stressor. Nevertheless, the body also remains on alert and is prepared to respond as it did during the alarm reaction, although with less intensity. If the exposure to a stressor continues over a longer period of time, the stage of exhaustion ensues. At this stage, the person is no longer able to adapt to the stressor. The body's ability to resist becomes depleted as physical wear takes its toll on the body's tissues and organs. As a result, illness, disease, and other permanent damage to the body, even death, may occur. Selye's general adaptation syndrome suggests that stressors tax the body via a three-phase process: an initial jolt, subsequent readjustment, and a later depletion of physical resources that ultimately lays the groundwork for the serious health problems and even death. It should be pointed out that this model is a response-based conceptualization of stress, focusing exclusively on the body's physical responses while largely ignoring psychological factors such as appraisal and interpretation of threats. Selye's model has had an enormous impact on the field of stress because it offers a general explanation for how stress can lead to physical damage and disease. Prolonged or repeated stress has been implicated in development of a number of disorders such as hypertension and coronary artery disease. The physiological mechanisms of stress are extremely complex, but they generally involve the work of two systems: the sympathetic nervous system and the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. When a person first perceives something as stressful, Selye's alarm reaction, the sympathetic nervous system triggers arousal via the release of adrenaline from the adrenal glands. And these are the adrenal glands right here on top of the kidneys. They are red. This is the hypothalamus, the blue one, and the little tiny green one down below is the pituitary gland. Hormones activates the fight or flight response to stress, such as accelerated heart rate and respiration. The HPA axis, which is primarily endocrine in nature, becomes especially active, although it works much more slowly than the sympathetic nervous system. In response to stress, the hypothalamus, one of the limbic structures in the brain, releases corticotropin-releasing factor, a hormone that causes the pituitary gland to release adrenocorticotropic hormone, or ACTH. And in this case, the red structure here is the hypothalamus, and the blue structure is the pituitary gland. The ACTH that activates the adrenal glands to secrete a number of hormones into the bloodstream. An important one is cortisol, which can affect virtually every organ within the body. Cortisol is commonly known as a stress hormone and helps provide that boost of energy when we first encounter a stressor, preparing us to run away, or to fight. Sustained elevated levels of cortisol weaken the immune system. In short bursts, this process could have some favorable effects, such as providing extra energy, improving immune system functioning temporarily, and decreasing pain sensitivity. Extended release of cortisol, which with prolonged or chronic stress, often comes at a high price. High levels of cortisol have been shown to produce a number of harmful effects, significantly weaken the immune system, while high levels are frequently observed among depressed individuals. When stress is extreme or chronic, it can have profoundly negative consequences. Stress often contributes to the development of certain psychological disorders, including post-traumatic stress disorder, major depressive disorder, and other serious psychiatric conditions. Stress is linked to the development and progression of a variety of physical illnesses and diseases. Researchers in one study found that the people injured during September 11, 2001 World Trade Center disaster or who developed post-traumatic stress symptoms afterward later suffered significantly elevated rates of heart disease. That is the World Trade Center collapsing. That's the second tower going down. The first one's already gone down. Self-reported stress symptoms among aging and retired Finnish food industry workers were associated with morbidity 11 years later. This study also predicted the onset of musculoskeletal nervous system and endocrine and metabolic disorders. Another study reported that male South Korean manufacturing employees who reported high levels of work-related stress were more likely to catch the common cold over the next several months than were those employees who reported lower work-related stress levels. For an individual to experience stress, they must first encounter a potential stressor. In general, stressors can be placed into one of two broad categories, chronic and acute. Chronic stressors include events that persist over an extended period of time, such as caring for a parent with dementia, long-term unemployment, or imprisonment. Acute stressors involve brief focal events that sometimes continue to be experienced as overwhelming well after the event is ended, such as falling on an icy sidewalk and breaking your leg. Wow. Whether chronic or acute, I don't. that is extreme. Whether chronic or acute, excuse me, potential stressors come in many shapes and sizes. They can include major traumatic events, significant life changes, daily hassles, as well as other situations in which a person is regularly exposed to threat, challenge, or danger. Some stressors involve traumatic events or situations in which a person is exposed to actual or threatened death or serious injury. Stressors in this category include exposure to military combat, threatened or actual physical assaults, for example, physical attacks, sexual assault, robbery, childhood abuse, terrorist attacks, natural disasters, for example, earthquakes, floods, and hurricanes, and automobile accidents. Men, non-whites, and individuals in lower socioeconomic status groups report experiencing a greater number of traumatic events than do women, whites, and individuals in higher SES, socioeconomic status groups. Some individuals who are exposed to stressors of extreme magnitude develop post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. It's a chronic stress reaction characterized by experiences and behaviors that may include intrusive and painful memories of the stressor event, jumpiness, persistent negative emotional states, detachment from others, angry outbursts, and avoidance of reminders of the event. Most stressors that we encounter are not nearly as intense as those already mentioned. Many potential stressors we face involve events or situations that require us to make changes in our ongoing lives and require time as we adjust to those changes. Examples include death of a close family member, marriage, divorce, and moving. In the 1960s, psychiatrists Thomas Holmes and Richard Rahe examined the link between life stressors and physical illness based on the hypothesis that life events requiring significant changes in a person's normal life routines are stressful, whether these events are desirable or undesirable. They developed the Social Readjustment Rating Scale, consisting of 43 life events that require varying degrees of personal readjustment. Many life events that most people would consider pleasant, for example, holidays, retirement, and marriage, are among those listed on the SRRS. These are examples of eustress. Holmes and Rahe also proposed that life events can add up over time and that experiencing a cluster of stressful events increases one's risk of developing physical illness. In developing their scale, Holmes and Rahe identified 48 events they referred to as life change units. Death of a spouse ranked highest on the scale with 100 LCUs, and divorce ranked second highest with 73 LCUs. In addition, personal injury or illness, marriage, and job termination also ranked highly on the scale with 53, 50, and 47 LCUs, respectively. Change in residence, 20 LCUs, change in eating habits, 15 LCUs, and vacation, 13 LCUs, ranked low on the scale. Minor violations of the law ranked the lowest with 11 LCUs. LCUs are for each checked item are totaled for a score quantifying the amount of life change. Agreement on the amount of adjustment required by the various life events on the SRRS is highly consistent, even cross-culturally. Research has demonstrated that accumulating a high number of life change units within a brief period of time, 1 or 2 years, is related to a wide range of physical illnesses, even accidents and athletic injuries, and mental health problems. In an early demonstration, researchers obtained LCU scores for U.S. and Norwegian Navy personnel who were about to embark on a 6-month voyage. A later examination of medical records revealed positive but small correlations between LCU scores prior to the voyage and subsequent illness symptoms during the ensuing 6-month journey. People tend to experience more physical symptoms such as backache, upset stomach, diarrhea, and acne on specific days in which self-reported LCU values are considerably higher than normal, such as the day of a family member's wedding. The Social Readjustment Rating Scale provides researchers a simple, easy-to-administer way of assessing the amount of stress in people's lives, and it has been used in hundreds of studies. Despite its widespread use, the scale has been subject to criticism. Many of the items on the SRRS are vague. Some have challenged its assumption that undesirable life events are no more stressful than desirable ones. The SRRS remains one of the most well-known instruments in the study of stress, and it is a useful tool for identifying potential stress-related health outcomes. Potential stressors do not always involve major life events. Daily hassles, the minor irritations and annoyance that are part of our everyday lives, such as rush hour traffic, lost keys, obnoxious coworkers, inclement weather, arguments with friends or family, can build up on one another and leave us just as stressed as life change events. Researchers have demonstrated that the frequency of daily hassles is actually a better predictor of both physical and psychological health than our life change units. In a well-known study of San Francisco residents, the frequency of daily hassles was found to be more strongly associated with physical health problems than were life change events. Daily minor hassles, especially interpersonal conflict, often lead to negative and distressed mood states. Cyber hassles that occur on social media may represent a modern and evolving source of stress. In one investigation, social media stress was tied to a loss of sleep in adolescence, presumably because ruminating about social media caused a physiological stress response that increased arousal. Clearly, daily hassles can add up and take a toll on us, both emotionally and physically. Stressors can include situations in which one is frequently exposed to challenging and unpleasant events, such as difficult, demanding, or unsafe working conditions. Although most jobs and occupations can be at times be demanding, some are clearly more stressful than others. Most would agree that jobs containing various unpleasant elements, such as those requiring exposure to loud noise, heavy equipment operator, for example, constant harassment and threats of physical violence, a prison guard, for example, perpetual frustration, bus driver in a major city, or those mandating that an employee work alternating day and night shifts, that would be a hotel desk clerk, are much more demanding and thus more stressful than those that do not contain such elements. Occupations with heavy workload, uncertainty, and lack of control create a great deal of stress. Chronic occupational stress contributes to job strain, a work situation that combines excessive job demands and workload with little discretion in decision making or job control. Many, many occupations involve at least a moderate amount of job strain in that they often involve heavy workloads and little job control. For example, inability to decide when to take breaks. Such jobs are often low status and include those of factory workers, postal clerks, supermarket cashiers, taxi drivers, and short order cooks. Job strain can have adverse consequences on both physical and mental health. It has been shown to be associated with increased risk of hypertension, heart attacks, recurrence of heart disease after a first heart attack, significant weight loss or gain, and major depressive disorder. A longitudinal study of over 10,000 British civil servants reported that workers under 50 years old who earlier had reported high job strain were 68% more likely to later develop heart disease than were those workers under 50 years old who reported little job strain. Some people who are exposed to chronically stressful work conditions can experience job burnout, which is a general sense of emotional exhaustion and cynicism in relation to one's job. Job burnout occurs frequently among those in human service jobs, for example, social workers, teachers, therapists, and police officers. Job burnout consists of three dimensions. The first dimension is exhaustion, a sense that one's emotional resources are drained or that one is at the end of their rope and has nothing more to give at a psychological level. Second, job burnout is characterized by depersonalization, a sense of emotional detachment between the worker and the recipients of his services, often resulting in callous, cynical, or indifferent attitudes toward these individuals. Third, job burnout is characterized by diminished personal accomplishment, which is the tendency to evaluate one's work negatively. Job strain appears to be one of the greatest risk factors leading to job burnout, which is most commonly observed in workers who are older, ages 55 to 64, unmarried, and whose jobs involve manual labor. Heavy alcohol consumption, physical inactivity, being overweight, and having a physical or lifetime mental disorder are also associated with job burnout. In addition, depression often co-occurs with job burnout. One large-scale study of over 3,000 Finnish employees reported that half of the participants with severe job burnout had some form of depressive disorder. Job burnout is often precipitated by feelings of having invested considerable energy, effort, and time into one's work while receiving little in return. For example, little respect or support from others or low pay. Our class relationships with friends and family, particularly the negative aspects of these relationships, can be a potent source of stress. Negative aspects of close relationships can include conflicts such as disagreement or arguments, lack of emotional support, or confiding and lack of reciprocity. All of these can be overwhelming, threatening to the relationship, and thus stressful. Such stressors can take a toll both emotionally and physically. A longitudinal investigation of over 9,000 British civil servants found that those who at one point had reported the highest levels of negative interactions in their closest relationships were 34% more likely to experience serious heart problems, fatal or non-fatal heart attacks, over a 13 to 15-year period compared to those who experienced the lowest levels of negative interaction. Health is affected when physiological reactions are sustained, as can happen in response to ongoing stress. If the reactions that compose the stress response are chronic, or if they frequently exceed normal ranges, they can lead to cumulative wear and tear on the body, in much of the same way that running your air conditioner on full blast all summer will eventually cause wear and tear on it. The high blood pressure that a person under considerable job strain experiences might eventually take a toll on their heart and set the stage for a heart attack or heart failure. Someone exposed to high levels of the stress hormone cortisol might become vulnerable to infection or disease because of weakened immune system functioning. Physical disorders or diseases whose symptoms are brought about or worsened by stress and emotional factors are called psychophysiological disorders. The physical symptoms of psychophysiological disorders are real and they can be produced or exacerbated by psychological factors, hence the psycho and physiological in psychophysiological. Friedman and Booth Cooley in 1987 statistically viewed 101 studies to examine the link between personality and illness. They proposed the existence of disease-prone personality characteristics, including depression, anger, hostility, and anxiety. A study of over 61,000 Norwegians identified depression as a risk factor for all major disease-related causes of death. In addition, neuroticism, a personality trait that reflects how anxious, moody, and sad one is, has been identified as a risk factor for chronic health problems with no morality. The immune system is the body's surveillance system. It consists of a variety of structures, cells, and mechanisms that serve to protect the body from invading microorganisms that can harm or damage the body's tissues and organs. When the immune system is working, as it should, it keeps us healthy and disease-free by eliminating harmful bacteria, viruses, and other foreign substances that have entered the body. Sometimes the immune system will function erroneously. Sometimes it can go awry by mistaking your body's own healthy cells for invaders and repeatedly attacking them. When this happens, the person is said to have an autoimmune disease, which can affect almost any part of the body. How an autoimmune disease affects a person depends on what part of the body it targets. Rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disease that affects the joints, results in joint pain, stiffness, and loss of function. Systemic lupus erythematosus, also pronounced erythematosus. I'm laughing because nurses pronounce it one way and lab techs pronounce it another way. So you may hear it as erythematosus or erythematosus. And autoimmune disease, cystic lupus erythematosus is an autoimmune disease that affects the skin, can result in rashes and swelling of the skin. It's really kind of interesting. This butterfly rash that you see right here, that's very common. Their fingers are very cold, and the reason is because they have what is known as Raynaud's phenomenon, or rouleau formation, where their red blood cells will stack up like poker chips, and they'll block capillaries. It's not a blood clot. It's just that they can't get through very well. So they slow down. And because they slow down, it makes the fingers cold. Your circulation of your blood keeps you warm, actually. And if it can't move fast enough, then you get cold. Now, there's a reason that they're showing a woman here. Lupus erythematosus is almost exclusively a female disorder. I haven't ever seen it in males, but I have seen a lot of it in females. But it's not gender specific. Graves' disease, an autoimmune disease that affects the thyroid gland and can result in fatigue, weight gain, and muscle aches. There's another reason why almost all these autoimmune diseases happen more frequently in females. And one of the reasons that is very rarely stated is the fact that when a woman has a baby, then some of the baby's cells will get into her cells, and they will stay in there for an extended length of time. And because of that, her immune system, his cells are not her cells, so her immune system might attack those cells, and that becomes the autoimmune disease. So that's one reason why it happens with women more than men. But even if she hasn't had any children, women tend to be more susceptible. And another reason is because women have a stronger immune system than men do. They have a more extensive immune system because they're the ones that bear the children. And because they bear the children, of course, their immune systems need to be stronger. And so they are. But sometimes the immune system will go a little bit haywire and create these autoimmune diseases. So what do we have? We've got rheumatoid arthritis, we've got lupus erythematosus, we've got Graves' disease, and that's it. The immune system may sometimes break down and be unable to do its job. This situation is referred to as immunosuppression, the decreased effectiveness of the immune system. When people experience immunosuppression, they become susceptible to any number of infections, illnesses, and diseases. Acquired immune deficiency syndrome, AIDS, is a serious and lethal disease that is caused by human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, which greatly weakens the immune system by infecting and destroying antibody-producing cells, thus rendering an untreated person vulnerable to any number of opportunistic infections. Psychoneuroimmunology, the question of whether stress and negative emotional states can influence immune function, has captivated researchers for over 3 decades, and discoveries made over the time have dramatically changed the face of health psychology. Now, I've studied all of this. One of my jobs earlier, before I became a psychologist, I was a laboratory technician. And so I studied immunity, or I dealt with immunity on a daily basis. So my background is a little bit more extensive than most psychologists because I can actually do a CBC. I can actually see your I can actually identify your white cells. So I've already worked with this, and when I was working in medicine. Psychoneuroimmunology is the field that studies how psychological factors such as stress influence the immune system and immune functioning. The term psychoneuroimmunology was first coined in 1981. I started as a lab tech in 1971. So when they coined psychoneuroimmunology as a term, had already been in the field for 10 years. It appeared as the title of a book that reviewed available evidence for associations between the brain, endocrine system, and immune system. This used to be a huge argument between medicine and psychology, the body-mind integration, this idea that what you think can affect your physical body. And of course, now we know that it does. That depression can cause all kinds of interesting problems. To a large extent, this field evolved from the discovery that there is a connection between the central nervous system and the immune system. Ader and Cohen in 1975 paired flavored water, the conditioned stimulus, with the presentation of an immunosuppressive drug, the unconditioned stimulus, causing sickness, an unconditioned response. Not surprisingly, rats exposed to this pairing developed a conditioned aversion to the flavored water. However, the taste of water itself later produced immunosuppression, a conditioned response, indicating that the immune system itself had been conditioned. Studies show that the effects of brief and chronic stressors on the immune system, such as public speaking, medical school examinations, unemployment, marital discord, divorce, death of spouse, burnout and job strain, caring for a relative of Alzheimer's disease, exposure to the harsh climate of Antarctica, all of these can make you sick. It has been repeatedly demonstrated that many kinds of stressors are associated with poor or weakened immune functioning. It is important to remember that there is a tangible physiological connection between the brain and the immune system. The sympathetic nervous system innervates immune organs such as the thymus, bone marrow, spleen, and even lymph nodes. Stress hormones released during hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis activation can adversely impact immune function by inhibiting the production of lymphocytes, white blood cells that circulate in the body's fluid that are important in the immune response. And this is a picture of white blood cells. All of these blue spots are white blood cells. And these are all lymphocytes. Lymphocytes specifically fight viruses. Most of your diseases are caused by viruses, not by bacteria. Bacteria cause infections. Viruses cause diseases. Measles, mumps, chickenpox, the herpes virus, all of these are caused by viruses. Almost all your diseases, the ones that kill most of the people, are viruses. That doesn't include the bubonic plague. Bubonic plague is caused by the bacteria Yersinia pestis. Tuberculosis is a bacterial infection. But most of them, measles, mumps, chickenpox, those are all smallpox. They're all caused by viruses. The cardiovascular system is composed of the heart and blood circulation system. For many years, cardiovascular disorders have been a major focal point in the study of psychophysiological disorders because of the cardiovascular system's centrality in the stress response. Heart disease is one such condition. Each year, heart disease causes approximately 1 in 3 deaths in the United States, and it is the leading cause of death in the developed world. The symptoms of heart disease vary somewhat depending on the specific kind of heart disease one has, but they generally involve angina. Angina means chest pain. That's all angina means. Chest pains are discomfort that occur when the heart does not receive enough blood. The pain often feels like the chest is being pressed or squeezed. Burning sensations in the chest and shortness of breath are also commonly reported. Such pain and discomfort can spread to the arms, jaw, neck, stomach as nausea, and back. And I have had a heart attack, but I didn't have angina. I had pain under my left clavicle. It felt like indigestion is what it felt like. A major risk factor for heart disease is hypertension, which is high blood pressure, and I do have high blood pressure. Hypertension forces a person's heart to pump harder, thus putting more physical strain on the heart. If left unchecked, hypertension can lead to a heart attack, stroke, or heart failure. It can also lead to kidney failure and blindness. Hypertension is a serious cardiovascular disorder, and it is sometimes called the silent killer because it has no symptoms. One who has high blood pressure may not even be aware of it. And there are no symptoms to hypertension, as weird as that is, except high blood pressure. Many risk factors contributing to cardiovascular disorders have been identified. These risk factors include social determinants such as aging, income, education, and employment status. Behavioral risk factors include unhealthy diet, tobacco use, physical inactivity, excessive alcohol consumption, obesity, and diabetes. Now, you may wonder what caused my heart attack. And the answer is I had just been fired. So it was my employment status that caused my heart attack. I was 60. Wasn't I? It was in 2010. Yeah, I was 60 years old. Yeah, I was 60. The rest of this, my diet's fine. I don't smoke. I exercise a lot. I don't drink alcohol at all. I'm not obese and I don't have diabetes. So there you go. Exposure to stressors of many kinds has been linked to cardiovascular problems, natural disasters, marital conflict, exposure to high traffic noise levels at one's home. I was living in Montana at the time, so there was no traffic, hardly at all. Perceived discrimination appears to be associated with hypertension among African Americans. I'm not African American, so I can't claim that one. People who are prone to heart disease tend to think, feel, and act differently than those who are not. These individuals tend to be intensively driven workaholics who are preoccupied with deadlines and always seem to be in a rush. That is not me. These individuals exhibit type A behavior patterns. Those who are more relaxed and laid back were characterized as type B. I'm a type B. In a sample of type A's and type B's, it was discovered that heart disease was over 7 times more frequent among the type A's than type B's. And I told you why I had my heart attack. I got fired. Major components of the type A pattern include an aggressive and chronic struggle to achieve more and more in less and less time. Specific characteristics of the type A pattern include an excessive competitive drive, chronic sense of time urgency, impatience, and hostility toward others, particularly those who get in the person's way. Extensive research clearly suggests that the anger hostility dimension of type A behavior pattern may be one of the most important factors in the development of heart disease. Haynes et al. In 1980 study showed that suppressed hostility was found to substantially elevate the risk of heart disease for both men and women. Research showed that individuals who respond with high levels of anger in a stressful situation were over 6 times more likely than those who indicated less anger to have had a heart attack by age 55, and they were 3.5 times more likely to have experienced heart disease by the same age. For a health standpoint, It clearly does not pay to be an angry person. Cheetah and Steptoe in 2009 concluded that evidence suggests that anger and hostility constitute serious long-term risk factors for adverse cardiovascular outcomes among both healthy individuals and those already suffering from heart disease. One reason angry and hostile moods might contribute to cardiovascular disease is that such moods can create social strain, mainly in the form of antagonistic social encounters with others. This strain could then lay the foundation for disease-promoting cardiovascular responses among hostile individuals. In this transactional model, hostility and social strain form a cycle. A number of other negative emotional states have been linked with heart disease, including negative affectivity and depression. Negative affectivity is a tendency to experience distressed emotional states involving anger, contempt, disgust, guilt, fear, and nervousness. It has been linked with the development of both hypertension and heart disease. By the early 1990s, evidence showed that depressed individuals who were followed for long periods of time were at increased risk for heart disease and cardiac death. In one investigation of over 700 Denmark residents, those with the highest depression scores were 71% more likely to have experienced a heart attack than were those with lower depression scores. Okay, so did my heart attack have anything to do with depression? Well, I'd just been fired, and it was a job I thought I would hold forever. I was teaching on the Fort Belknap Reservation. I loved my job, loved where I lived, loved the people that I was working with, and one of the reasons that I was having trouble, one of the reasons I got fired was because I was trying to finish my PhD, and I needed to do research with the population, and the administration didn't want me to finish my PhD. They didn't want me to work with the population, so they blocked my work with the population. It was not a good situation. Now, the strange part was that this was building up over a couple of years. I was talking to them about working, and they said yes, 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 and then when it came time, they said no. I said, but you've been saying yes all along. And they were saying, well, no. They just kept saying no. So I got crossways with the administration, and because of that, I got fired. Because I went ahead with my research. I just did my research off the reservation instead of on the reservation. So was I depressed? Probably, yeah. Yeah, I was depressed. But it was the fact that I'd just been fired from the job I thought I would have. I had lots and lots and lots of friends there. As a matter of fact, half my friends on Facebook are from Fort Belknap. So there you go. I don't know if that means anything. It is now clear that a relationship exists between patients with heart disease and patients with depression. Patients with heart disease have, and I'm not normally a depressed person. It was just a real kick in the head when I got fired. Real kick in the head. These were all my friends. This didn't make a lot of sense. Patients with heart disease have more depression than the general population, and people with depression are more likely to eventually develop heart disease and experience higher mortality than those who do not have depression. The more severe the depression, the higher the risk. And of course, that was an acute situation. It wasn't a chronic situation. I'm not chronically depressed. It was an acute situation. I had acute depression because of the situation, and that's what caused the heart attack. Sounds like I'm trying to rationalize, doesn't it? Well, I've been alive for 16 years since I had my heart attack, so that's a long time. In one study, death rates from cardiovascular problems was substantially higher in depressed people. Depressed men were 50% more likely to have died from cardiovascular problems, and depressed women were 70% more likely. to die. A statistical review of 10 longitudinal studies involving initially healthy individuals revealed that those with elevated depressive symptoms have, on average, a 64% greater risk of developing heart disease than those with fewer symptoms. I don't remember why I have this picture here. She's a cutie, isn't she? A study of over 63,000 registered nurses found that those with more depressed symptoms when the study began were 49% more likely to experience fatal heart disease over a 12-year period. Asthma is a chronic and serious disease in which the airways of the respiratory system become obstructed, leading to a great difficulty expelling air from the lungs. And this is exactly what happens. The airway obstruction is caused by inflammation of the airway, leading to a thickening of the airway wall and a tightening of the muscles around them, resulting in a narrowing of the airway. That's what's happening here. Because airways become obstructed, a person with asthma will sometimes have great difficulty breathing and will experience repeated episodes of wheezing, chest tightness, shortness of breath, and coughing, the latter occurring mostly during the morning and night. Around 4,000 people die each year from asthma-related causes, and asthma is a contributing factor to another 7,000 deaths each year. The CDC has revealed that asthma affects 18.7 million United States adults, and it's more common among people with lower education and income levels. Especially concerning is that asthma is on the rise, with rates of asthma increasing 157% between 2000 and 2010. Asthma attacks are acute episodes in which an asthma sufferer experiences the full range of symptoms. Asthma exacerbation is often triggered by environmental factors such as air pollution, allergens, pollen, mold, pet hairs, cigarette smoke, airway infections, cold air, or a sudden change in temperature and exercise. People with asthma tend to report and display a high level of negative emotions such as anxiety, and asthma attacks have been linked to periods of high emotionality. High levels of emotional distress during both laboratory tasks and a daily life have been found to negatively affect airway function and can produce asthma-like symptoms in people with asthma. In one investigation, 20 adults with asthma wore pre-programmed wristwatches that signal them to breathe into a portable device that measures airway function. Results showed that the higher levels of negative emotions and stress were associated with increased airway obstruction and self-reported asthma symptoms. A longitudinal study of 145 children found that parenting difficulties during the first year of life increased the chances that the child developed asthma by 107%. A cross-sectional study of over 10,000 Finnish college students found that high rates of parent or personal conflicts, for example, parental divorce, separation from spouse, or severe conflicts in other long-term relationships, increased the risk of asthma onset. A study of over 4,000 middle-aged men who were interviewed in the early 1990s and again a decade later found that breaking off an important life partnership, for example, divorce, or breaking off relationships from parents, increased the risk of developing asthma by 124% over the time of the study. A headache is a continuous pain anywhere in the head and neck region. Inflammation of the sinuses caused by an infection or allergic reaction can cause sinus headaches, which are experienced as pain in the cheeks and forehead. Migraine headaches are a type of headache thought to be caused by blood vessel swelling and increased blood flow. Migraines are characterized by severe pain on one or both sides of the head, an upset stomach, and disturbed vision. They are more frequently experienced by women than men. Tension headaches are triggered by tightening, tensing of facial and neck muscles. They are the most commonly experienced kind of headache, accounting for 42% of all headaches worldwide. In the United States, well over one-third of the population experiences tension headaches each year, and 2 to 3% of the population suffers from chronic tension headaches. I have never had a headache, as exciting as that may be. A number of factors can contribute to tension headaches, including sleep deprivation, skipping meals, eye strain, overexertion, muscular tension caused by poor posture, and stress. Stress has been demonstrated to increase sensitivity to pain. Tension headaches sufferers compared to non-sufferers have a lower threshold for and greater sensitivity to pain, and they report greater levels of subjective stress when faced with a stressor. Stress may contribute to tension headaches by increasing pain sensitivity in already sensitive pain pathways in tension headache sufferers. And this, of course, is Betty Boop having a headache. Lazarus and Folkman in 1984 distinguished two fundamental kinds of coping: problem-focused coping and emotion-focused coping. In problem-focused coping, one of the attempts to manage or alter the problem that is causing one to experience stress. Problem-focused coping strategies are similar to strategies used in everyday problem solving. They typically involve identifying the problem, considering possible solutions, weighing the costs and benefits of these solutions, and then selecting an alternative. Emotion-focused coping consists of efforts to change or reduce the negative emotions associated with stress. These efforts may include avoiding, minimizing, or distancing oneself from the problem, or positive comparisons with others. I'm not as bad off as she is, or seeking something positive in a negative event. Now that I've been fired, I can sleep in for a few days. In some cases, emotion-focused coping strategies involve reappraisal, whereby the stressor is construed differently and somewhat self-deceptively without changing its objective level of threat. While many stressors elicit both kinds of coping strategies, problem-focused coping is more likely to occur when encountering stressors. When encountering stressors we perceive as controllable, while emotion-focused coping is more likely to predominate when faced with stressors that we believe we are powerless to change. Clearly, emotion-focused coping is more effective in dealing with uncontrollable stressors. Perceived control is our beliefs about our personal capacity to exert influence over and shape outcomes, and it has major implications for our health and happiness. Research has demonstrated that perceptions of personal control are associated with a variety of favorable outcomes, such as better physical and mental health and greater psychological well-being. Greater personal control is also associated with lower reactivity to stressors in daily life. You get it? He's pushing on the control. The link between perceived control and health may provide an explanation for the frequently observed relationship between social class and health outcomes. Research has found that more affluent individuals experience better health, partly because they tend to believe that they can personally control and manage their reactions to life's stressors. Perhaps buoyed by the perceived level of control, individuals of higher social class may be prone to overestimating the degree of influence that they have over particular outcomes. The need to form and maintain strong, stable relationships with others is a powerful, pervasive, and fundamental human motive. Building strong interpersonal relationships with others helps us establish a network of close, caring individuals who can provide social support in times of distress, sorrow, and fear. Social support can be thought of as the soothing impact of friends, family, and acquaintances. Social support can take many forms, including advice, guidance, encouragement, acceptance, emotional comfort, and tangible assistance, such as financial help. Other people can be very comforting to us when we are faced with a wide range of life stressors, and they can be extremely helpful in our effort to manage these challenges. Social support appears to work by boosting the immune system, especially among people who are experiencing stress. In the study, spouses of cancer patients who reported high levels of social support showed indications of better immune functioning on 2 out of 3 immune functioning measures compared to spouses who were below the median on reported social support. Studies of other populations have produced similar results, including excuse me, those of spousal caregivers of dementia sufferers, medical students, elderly adults, and cancer patients. Well, that's a first. I usually don't sneeze during these things. Oh, it's pollen season. Beyond having a sense of control in establishing social support networks, there are numerous other means by which we can manage stress. A common technique people use to combat stress is exercise, and that's what I do. It is well established that exercise, both of long aerobic and short anaerobic duration, is beneficial for both physical and mental health. I lift weights, and that's both aerobic and anaerobic. There is considerable evidence that physically fit individuals are more resistant to the adverse effects of stress and recover more quickly from stress than less physically fit individuals. One reason exercise may be beneficial is because it might buffer some of the deleterious physiological mechanisms of stress. In high-stress humans, exercise has been shown to prevent telomere shortening, which may explain the common observation of a youthful appearance among those who exercise regularly. Exercise in later adulthood appears to minimize the detrimental effects of stress on the hippocampus and memory. Among cancer survivors, exercise has been shown to reduce anxiety and depressive symptoms. Exercise is a highly effective tool for regulating stress. Psychologists have suggested that happiness consists of 3 distinct elements: the pleasant life, the good life, and the meaningful life. Pleasant life is realized through the attainment of day-to-day pleasures that add fun, joy, and excitement to our lives. The good life is achieved through identifying our unique skills and abilities and engaging these talents to enrich our lives. Those who achieve the good life often find themselves absorbed in their work or their recreational pursuits. Sneezing. The meaningful life involves a deep sense of fulfillment that comes from using our talents in the service of the greater good, in ways that benefit the lives of others or that make the world a better place. In general, the happiest people tend to be those who pursue the full life. They orient their pursuits toward all 3 elements. For practical purposes, a precise definition of happiness might incorporate each of these elements: an enduring state of mind consisting of joy, contentment, and other positive emotions, plus the sense that one's life has meaning and value. The definition implies that happiness is a long-term state, what is often characterized as subjective well-being, rather than merely a transient positive mood we all experience from time to time. It is this enduring happiness that has captured the interest of psychologists and other social scientists. Evidently, playing in leaves is a definition of happiness. The world, I own an orchard. So I have, 52 trees right now. 52 apple trees and 4 or 5 cherry bushes. And lots of raspberry vines. So there you go. The average person in the world tends to be relatively happy and tends to indicate experiencing more positive feelings than negative feelings. When asked to evaluate their current lives on a scale ranging from 0 to 10, with 0 representing worst possible life and 10 representing best possible life, people in more than 150 countries surveyed from 2010 to 2012 reported an average score of 5.2. People who live in North America, Australia, and New Zealand reported the highest average score of 7.1, whereas those living sub-Saharan Africa reported the lowest average score at 4.6. Worldwide, the five happiest countries are Denmark, Norway, Switzerland, the Netherlands, and Sweden. The United States is ranked 17th happiest. So where are all these countries? These are in northern Europe. Denmark, Norway, and Sweden are Scandinavian countries. Switzerland is in the middle of Europe, and the Netherlands is these are all places where it turns cold in the wintertime. Some places really cold. And it's really kind of interesting. I've been reading books about Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Iceland, and Greenland, and a lot of those people sleep outdoors in the wintertime. They sleep. They have they have places where, and they don't. The only part of their body that is not covered is their face, where they so they breathe in the cold air. As weird as that is. Okay, are we talking about happiness? Yeah, I think we are. Oh, they're happier in Canada. It's colder up there, that's why. There you go. Family and other social relationships appear to be key factors correlated with happiness. Studies show that married people report being happier than those who are single, divorced, or widowed. Happy individuals also report that their marriages are fulfilling. Some have suggested that satisfaction with marriage and family life is the strongest predictor of happiness. Happy people tend to have more friends, more high quality social relationships, and stronger social support networks than less happy people. Happy people also have a high frequency of contact with friends. A nation's per capita gross domestic product is associated with happiness levels. Changes in GDP, which is a less certain index of household income, bear little relationship to changes in happiness. On the whole, residents of affluent countries tend to be happier than residents of poor countries. Within countries, wealthy individuals are happier than poor individuals, but the association is much weaker. To the extent that it leads to increases in purchasing power, increases in income are associated with increases in happiness. Income within societies appears to correlate with happiness only up to a point. In a study of over 450,000 U.S. residents, researchers found that well-being rises with annual income, but only up to $75,000. The average increase in reported well-being for people with incomes greater than $75,000 was nothing. As implausible as these findings might seem, higher incomes may impair people's ability to savor and enjoy the small pleasures of life. Happy people, compared to those who are less happy, are more likely to graduate from college and secure more meaningful and engaging jobs. Once they obtain a job, they are also more likely to succeed. While education shows a positive but weak correlation with happiness, intelligence is not appreciably related to happiness either. The relationship between religiosity and happiness depends on societal circumstances. Nations and states with more difficult living conditions, for example, widespread hunger and low life expectancy, tend to be more highly religious than societies with more favorable living conditions. Among those who live in nations with difficult living conditions, religiosity is associated with greater well-being. In nations with more favorable living conditions, religious and non-religious individuals report similar levels of well-being. The living conditions of one's nation can influence factors related to happiness. To the extent that people possess characteristics that are highly valued by their culture, they tend to be happier. Self-esteem is a stronger predictor of life satisfaction in individualistic cultures than in collectivistic cultures. And extroverted people tend to be happier in extroverted cultures than in introverted cultures. Something similar to sensory adaptation often occurs when people experience emotional reactions to life events. In much the same way, our senses adapt to changes in stimulation, for example, our eyes adapting to bright light after walking out of the darkness of a movie theater into bright afternoon sun. We eventually adapt to changing emotional circumstances in our lives. When an event that provokes positive or negative emotions occurs, at first we tend to experience its emotional impact at full intensity. We feel a burst of pleasure following such things as a marriage proposal, birth of a child, acceptance of a law school, uh, uh, an inheritance, and the like. As you might imagine, lottery winners experience a surge of happiness after hitting the jackpot. In some circumstances, happiness levels do not revert to their original positions after a joyous occasion. People generally tend to adapt to marriage so that it no longer makes them happier or unhappier than before. They often do not fully adapt to unemployment or severe disabilities. In a study, German respondents did not get lasting emotional boosts from marriage. Instead, they reported brief increases in happiness followed by quick adaptation. Widows and those who have been laid off experience sizable decreases in happiness that appear to result in long term changes in life satisfaction. Long term happiness levels can and do change for some people. Recent findings about happiness provide an optimistic picture, suggesting that real changes in happiness are possible. The thoughtful, developed well-being interventions designed to augment people's baseline levels of happiness may increase happiness in ways that are permanent and long-lasting. These changes in happiness may be targeted at individual, organizational, and societal levels. Researchers in one study found that a series of happiness interventions involving such exercises as writing down 3 good things that occurred each day led to increases in happiness that lasted over 6 months. Measuring happiness and well being at the societal level over time may assist policymakers in determining if people are generally happy or miserable, as well as when and why they might feel the way they do. Studies show that average national happiness scores over time and across countries relate strongly to 6 key variables: per capita gross domestic product, GDP, which reflects a nation's economic standard of living, social support, freedom to make important life choices, healthy life expectancy, freedom from perceived corruption in government and business, and generosity. In 1998, Martin Seligman urged psychologists to focus more on understanding how to build human strength and psychological well being. Seligman helped establish positive psychology. Positive psychology can be thought of as the science of happiness. It is an area of study that seeks to identify and promote those qualities that lead to greater fulfillment in our lives. This field looks at people's strengths and what helps individuals to lead happy, contented lives, and it moves away from focusing on people's pathology, faults, and problems. And that was okay. So I've been studying psychology since 1976, and when I first started, all we ever talked about was how people got sick. We talked about mental illness, and that's all we ever talked about. We never talked about what is normal, what is happy, what is good. And medicine does the same thing. Medicine, well, we talk about wellness. They talk about wellness, but doctors don't get it because doctors are supposed to focus on making us feel good, making us healthy, and instead they focus on diseases. So this is a problem. This has been a problem in medicine and in psychology. And now we're trying to move away from that. We're trying to move away from that in medicine with wellness studies, and we're trying to move away from that in psychology with positive psychology. And I think it's a real good thing because part of the problem is we don't know what's good. If you can't identify what's good, if you can't identify what's normal, the way that people are supposed to be, happy and whatnot, then you have no idea whether they are. All you're trying to do is change something that you see as bad. That's the problem. I'm running into that right now in medicine. Uh, I have a lab result that is very negative, but the problem is so the question is that negative thing, uh, should we do anything about the negative thing? Or does this have to do with adaptation? Me adapting to the fact I don't have a spleen. It gets real confusing. And if you remember, your spleen is part of your immune system, and that's a part that I don't have. But I lost my spleen 45 years ago, and I haven't been sick since. I'm supposed to catch every disease that comes down the pipe. I'm supposed to catch colds, the flu. I should have had coronavirus. I don't catch anything. Not only that, but I worked in the laboratory. And in the laboratory, I came in contact with every disease that came through the door. So the question is, what's going on? Why am I still alive? I shouldn't be still alive. That's the question. And that's what the doctors can't answer. Sorry. Some of the topics studied by positive psychologists include altruism and empathy, creativity, forgiveness, compassion, the importance of positive emotions, enhancement of immune system functioning, savoring the fleeting moments of life, and strengthening virtues as a way to increase authentic happiness. Recent efforts in the field of positive psychology have focused on extending its principles toward peace and well-being at the level of global community. Qualities that help promote psychological well-being, for example, having meaning and purpose in life, a sense of autonomy, positive emotions, and satisfaction with life, are linked with a range of favorable health outcomes, especially improved cardiovascular health, mainly through their relationships with biological functions and health behaviors. The quality that has received attention is positive affect, which refers to pleasurable engagement with the environment, such as happiness, joy, enthusiasm, alertness, and excitement. The characteristics of positive affect, as with negative affect, can be brief, long-lasting, or trait-like. Independent of age, gender, and income, positive affect is associated with greater social connectedness, emotional and practical support, adaptive coping efforts, and lower depression. It is also associated with longevity and favorable physiological functioning. So when we talk about longevity, and I've been talking about myself a lot because, well, I had a heart attack. I don't have a spleen. That's part of my immune system is gone. So what else are we talking? Oh, longevity. So life expectancy for a white male in the United States right now is 75 plus. It's like 75.52. I'm 76 years old, so I've already gone beyond my life expectancy. When I was first born, my life expectancy was 59 years old. And, well, I've gone well beyond that, but okay, so I'm an anomaly. I apologize. I've had a heart attack. I don't have a spleen, and I'm still alive. And I've lived past my expiration date. Positive effect serves as a protective factor against heart disease. In a 10-year study of Nova Scotians, Nova Scotia is it's an island off of Canada on the eastern part of Canada. The rate of heart disease was 22% lower for each 1 point increase in the measure of positive effect. In terms of our health, the expression "don't worry, be happy" is helpful advice. There has also been much work suggesting that optimism, the general tendency to look on the bright side of things, is also a significant predictor of positive health outcomes. Whereas positive affect is mostly concerned with positive feeling state, optimism has been regarded as a generalized tendency to expect the good things will happen. Optimism has been conceptualized as a tendency to view life's stressors and difficulties as temporary and external to oneself. Studies have consistently shown that optimism is linked to longevity, healthier behaviors, fewer post-surgical complications, better immune functioning among men with prostate cancer, and better treatment adherence. Optimistic people report fewer physical symptoms, less pain, better physical functioning, and are less likely to be rehospitalized following heart surgery. And that is it. Okay, now I got to show you something. Maybe. All right. There you go. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. I don't know. Maybe people 76 years old aren't supposed to look this good. Okay. I'll talk to you guys next time. Next time we're going to talk about, this time we talked about positive psychology. Next week we're going to talk about the stuff we were talking about before. Um, Mental illness is the next and last chapter. So I'll talk to you guys next week.